What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton's car could be doomed to fail in Qatar, even before starting on Sunday? Because yes, what has just been leaked has not only made Ferrari tremble, but has left Fred Vasseur in a state of genuine alarm. And we are not talking about simple rumors. We are talking about a structural failure, hidden for months, that threatens to destroy the performance of the SF-25 at the most critical moment of a championship. To understand the magnitude of what is happening inside Ferrari, you have to start by looking back. Not much. Just a few weeks ago in Las Vegas, where the team experienced one of the most confusing and frustrating weekends of the modern era. Ferrari arrived at that event with very high expectations, not only because of the potential shown in the preseason tests, but because the urban layout promised to adapt well to its technical package. However, nothing went as planned. Strategy errors, setup problems, and a chaotic overall execution left the team exposed to its rivals. Fred Vasseur, who until then had enjoyed some media protection thanks to the arrival of Lewis Hamilton and the team's general improvement in 2024, began to feel much more aggressive internal pressure. Because in Maranello, failures are not easily forgotten. And even less so when they involve a figure of the magnitude of Hamilton, who had been brought in as a symbol of the rebirth of the Scuderia. This is the climate with which Ferrari approached the Qatar Grand Prix. A crucial event not only because of the type of circuit, fast, technical, demanding, but because it represents a definitive test for the car's aerodynamic and mechanical concepts. And just at that moment, when the team most needed stability, the unthinkable happened. An internal technical leak began to circulate in specialized forums, engineering chats, and independent media with access to the paddock. What was leaked was not a simple rumor or vague opinion. It was specific, documented, and dangerously plausible information about a structural defect that could doom the SF-25. The news fell like a bomb within the team, because what the leak said was not just a performance issue. It was a direct threat to the legality of the car under the FIA technical regulations. In simple terms, the SF-25 has a rear suspension defect that, under the extreme conditions of the Losail circuit, could cause the car's flat bottom to hit the ground more than permitted. This is not a minor detail. It's the same type of situation that led to Hamilton's disqualification in China. And here in Qatar, the risk of it happening again is very high. Imagine for a moment being in Lewis Hamilton's shoes. A 7-time world champion, newly arrived at Ferrari, looking for one last great adventure to solidify his legacy. And now, on the eve of one of the most critical races of the year, he finds out that his car could be legally unsustainable if performance is not compromised. It's an almost perverse dilemma: lift the car and lose lap time, or risk a devastating penalty. In both scenarios, competitiveness disappears. Qatar is not just another race. It is a testing ground that could mercilessly expose the hidden cracks of a project that arrived with promises and now faces its first uncomfortable truths. Talking about structural failures in a Formula One car sounds alarming, but is even more so when the team in question is Ferrari. Is not simply a small weakness or a margin of error within the setup. What has been leaked suggests that SF-25 has a root problem, a design defect that compromises its ability to compete in conditions of high lateral load, and that is aggravated on a track like Qatar. To understand the seriousness of the matter, you have to analyze how this part of the car really works. The rear suspension of the SF-25 follows a pull rod scheme, a configuration that prioritizes aerodynamic efficiency by allowing a more compact design and better channeling of flow towards the diffuser. This design, although very effective in the wind tunnel, can present mechanical limitations if not managed with adequate structural rigidity. And that's where the SF-25 is showing cracks. The torsional rigidity of the housing that connects the gearbox to the suspension elements is not sufficient to maintain the integrity of the assembly under prolonged loads. When the car goes through fast curves, such as those that abound in Losail, lateral forces exert continuous pressure on this structure. What should hold firm and control the movement of the car begins to flex. Not visibly, of course, but enough to alter the suspension geometry in real time. The result is as simple as it is devastating. The car drops more than expected. The flat bottom comes dangerously close to the asphalt, and at certain points it even touches it. This produces aggressive wear on the plank, the wooden plank that runs underneath the car, and which the FIA uses as a reference to ensure that the cars do not drive too close to the ground, an aerodynamic advantage that is strictly prohibited. In previous races, such as in China, this same phenomenon caused Hamilton to be disqualified. On that occasion, there was talk of high-level mismanagement or a poorly calculated risk strategy. But now, with the Qatar leak, it is clear that it was not a specific adjustment error. It was an early symptom of the problem that now threatens to explode in Losail. The irony is cruel. The SF-25 was designed to compete at the highest level, and its straight and slow corner numbers are respectable. But when faced with circuits with fast corner sequences, such as Qatar Sector 3, its weaknesses are ruthlessly exposed. Because power or strategy is not enough there. There, the mechanical integrity of the chassis and suspension is all or nothing. And here comes the most painful decision for Ferrari. The only way to prevent the car from touching the ground is to raise its height relative to the asphalt. But that leads to a direct loss of performance. The SF-25 generates much of its downforce from the flat bottom and diffuser. Raising the car means reducing that load. And that translates into less corner speed, less traction at the exit, and more time lost per lap. On a track like Qatar with long and demanding laps, that can mean between 7 and 10 tenths per lap. Enough to go from fighting for the podium to being out of the points. The most disconcerting thing is that Ferrari has had to operate all this time as if this problem did not exist. There is no quick fix. Redesigning the shell or suspension mid-season is not feasible under the current budget limit. So everything becomes a race against time, to adjust the settings, protect the bottom of the car, and pray that the wear does not exceed what is allowed. And while the FIA allows certain flex margins in static load tests, dynamic conditions like those in Qatar are impossible to simulate with complete fidelity. What works in the simulator or in the factory can fall apart on the track. That is Vasseur's real fear. Not only lose performance, lose legality, being disqualified again, and with that, lose credibility in the world. This is the situation that Ferrari faces. A car with a hidden wound, a circuit that demands what it can offer the least, and an impossible decision. Run slower or risk being left out. Within Ferrari, the word leak is not only synonymous with crisis. It is an existential threat. Maranello's internal culture has always been one of secretive pride, where problems are resolved behind closed doors and any public exposure is seen as a betrayal. For this reason, the leak of technical information about the SF-25 suspension defect has raised an alarm that goes far beyond the merely competitive. Fred Vasseur, team leader, has been left in an extremely delicate position. It must not only contain the technical consequences of the failure, but also manage the mistrust that now exists between the engineers, the technical staff, and the pilots themselves. Because when such a critical weakness is made public before a race weekend, the message conveyed is one of internal chaos, lack of control, and vulnerability at the worst possible time. The most serious thing is that this leak occurs at a time when the team needed absolute unity. Qatar is not only a technical challenge, it also represents an emotional turning point. Ferrari came from an optimistic transition with the arrival of Lewis Hamilton, a signing designed not only to win races, but to redefine the DNA of the Scuderia. And yet, in only its third Grand Prix, the champion's car finds itself embroiled in a potential regulatory crisis. The contrast with the redemption narrative that the team had built is brutal. In the technical meetings prior to the weekend, palpable tension has been reported. Track engineers are already handling alternative configuration plans that involve raising the height of the car, redesigning the suspension stiffness for Qatar, and even modifying the aerodynamic setup to redistribute the load to the front axle. None of these solutions is ideal. They all involve commitments. But the real dilemma is this: is it worth risking competitiveness in exchange for legality? Ferrari is trapped. She cannot run the risk of being disqualified. You can't lift the car without losing performance. And you can't redesign it without compromising your budget. This is the kind of technical cheating that ruins championships. And while Vasseur tries to put out the fire, in Maranello's offices there is already talk of internal audits, structural changes, and the beginning of a new stage of pressure, one that can transform this season into a nightmare. Qatar is not just another race. It's a hinge. If Ferrari does not overcome this challenge with intelligence and humility, this may be the breaking point, not only of its 2025 campaign, but of the trust that Hamilton, Leclerc, and its own engineers have placed in the project. The 2025 Qatar Grand Prix is no longer just another event on the calendar. It has become, without exaggeration, a final exam for Ferrari, not at the end of the championship, but at the beginning. Because what is at stake in Losail is not just a race, nor even a decent classification. It is something much more delicate, the technical and sporting credibility of the SF-25 project. A car that was born with title ambition, with a narrative of redemption behind it, and that today faces a crisis that exposes its deepest weaknesses. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.